The WNBA just offered its players what sounds like an absolute dream deal on paper. $1 million maximum salaries, tripled minimums, and a massive salary cap increase that would make stars richer than ever before. Headlines across sports media screamed about seven-figure contracts and unprecedented generosity from league owners. Fans saw the numbers and immediately started asking why players weren't jumping at this opportunity. But here's what nobody's telling you. The players took one look at this supposedly generous offer, called it a slap in the face, and refused to sign. Not because they're greedy or unreasonable, but because the real numbers tell a completely different story than what you've been reading. The WNBA is playing a numbers game with the media and the public, and once you understand what's actually happening behind closed doors, you'll see why players are willing to risk the entire 2026 season to fight for something better. The January 9th deadline is approaching fast. Both sides remain miles apart, and the first strike in WNBA history might be closer than anyone wants to admit. In November 2025, the WNBA made what appeared to be a groundbreaking proposal to the players' union. The offer included maximum salaries exceeding $1 million, a staggering increase from the current supermax of just $249,244. Minimum salaries would jump from $66,079 all the way up to over $225,000. The salary cap per team would explode from $1.5 million to $5 million in the first year of the new deal. When these numbers leaked to the media, sports outlets rushed to publish stories about how the WNBA was finally stepping up and taking care of its players. One Associated Press source even described the proposal as a highly lucrative package providing substantial increases designed to bring negotiations to a quick conclusion. On the surface, it looked like players were about to get everything they'd been asking for. Social media lit up with people questioning why players weren't celebrating, why the union seemed hesitant, and why negotiations were still dragging on. But there's a massive catch that most of those headline writers either didn't understand or chose to ignore. That $1 million plus figure everyone's talking about, it's not actually a $1 million salary. The real base supermax in the league's proposal sits somewhere between $800,000 and $850,000. So where does that extra money come from to reach the advertised million? Projected revenue sharing that might never actually materialize. No player would sign a contract in 2026 with a guaranteed base salary of over $1 million under this proposal. Here's where the WNBA's numbers game gets really sneaky and why players saw through it immediately. The league structured their proposal to include projected revenue-sharing payments that would be paid out after the season ends, assuming certain revenue targets are hit. Sound familiar? It should, because the current collective bargaining agreement already has a revenue-sharing clause built in. That clause has never been triggered once since it was introduced. The COVID pandemic destroyed any chance of hitting the cumulative revenue targets that were set, and players watched years go by without seeing a single dollar from that supposedly guaranteed revenue share. They're not about to fall for the same trick twice. But it gets worse. The league's proposal offers players 50% of a specific revenue metric, which sounds generous until you dig into the details. That revenue metric doesn't include all of the league's actual revenue. The WNBA would exclude certain income streams before even calculating what players get. Then, they deduct expenses from what's left. When you do the actual math, multiple sources close to the negotiations confirmed that players would end up receiving less than 15% of the WNBA's total revenue under this proposal. And here's the real kicker. As the collective bargaining agreement progresses and the league continues to grow, that percentage would actually decrease over time. Meanwhile, NBA players receive between 49% and 51% of basketball-related income. WNFL players get 48.8% of revenue. NHL players get 50%. The WNBA players are currently stuck at somewhere between 9% and 10%. And the league's latest offer wouldn't meaningfully change that reality despite all the impressive-sounding salary numbers being thrown around. So what are the players actually demanding, and why are they willing to blow up negotiations over it? The Women's National Basketball Players Association's counter-proposal asks for players to receive 29% to 30% of total WNBA revenue, not 50% like the NBA, not even 40%, just 30%. And they're not asking for salaries equal to what NBA players make, despite what critics claim on social media. Kelsey Plum, the union's first vice president, explained it perfectly during a recent podcast appearance. She said a lot of misinformation gets spread suggesting players want to be paid what men are paid, but that's not true at all. They're simply asking for the same percentage of revenue, or at least a similar percentage. Right now, that's not the case, and that's what they're fighting for. The fundamental issue isn't about the dollar amounts on paychecks. It's about tying salaries directly to league growth in real time. So when the business booms, players benefit proportionally instead of being locked into fixed raises that don't reflect reality. The WNBA is experiencing explosive growth right now. A $2.2 billion television deal kicks in for the 2026 season. Expansion fees are bringing in $250 million per team, with 3 new franchises joining by 2030. Viewership numbers are smashing records. Attendance is up across the board. Merchandise sales are flying off the shelves. The business is clearly thriving, yet players are still getting 3% annual raises that were negotiated before any of this growth happened. Players are asking the most basic question possible: where's our cut of this boom? The league's proposal also includes several changes that make life significantly harder for players while asking them to give more. One of the most controversial elements is the elimination of team-provided housing. Currently, WNBA teams cover housing costs for players during the season, which is standard practice in leagues like this. The new proposal would force players to find and pay for their own month-to-month leases in some of the most expensive cities in America, all while playing a condensed schedule that makes apartment hunting nearly impossible. Training camp might also start in March instead of May under this proposal, extending the season and adding more travel while simultaneously cutting the support players receive. The core designation system, which functions like the NFL's franchise tag, would remain in place. This tool allows teams to prevent star players from reaching true free agency for up to 7 years through a combination of rookie contracts, restricted free agency, and core tags. Players can't negotiate on the open market until they're nearly 30 years old in many cases, severely limiting their earning potential during their prime. Meanwhile, other leagues are rolling out the red carpet for women's basketball players. Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league founded by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier offers a $100,000 minimum salary for a short season plus equity stakes in the league itself. They provide housing, travel accommodations, and treat players like the stars they are. Project B and other emerging leagues are offering similar packages. The WNBA wants to demand prioritization, requiring players to choose the W over these other opportunities, but the compensation doesn't warrant that kind of exclusive commitment yet. In December 2025, players sent the strongest possible message about how serious they are. 98% of players who voted authorized the union's executive committee to call a strike when necessary. The participation rate was 93%, meaning nearly the entire league showed up to vote. This would be the first work stoppage in the WNBA's 29-year history, and the fact that players are this unified should terrify league executives. A 7-person executive committee now holds the power to call a strike with just 48 hours' notice. Nafisa Collier told reporters that despite frustration on both sides trying to get what they want, players still have that fire within them to do whatever it takes. They're going to fight for what they believe they deserve, and they're not backing down. Players wore shirts reading, "Pay us what you owe us," during the All-Star game, making their stance crystal clear to fans and league officials alike. Social media exploded with criticism, with fans questioning why players would refuse million-dollar offers in a league that's been losing money. One common refrain was, "Making million-dollar salaries in a league losing money?" The league has indeed lost somewhere between $40 million and $50 million annually in recent years. But here's the transparency problem. The WNBA won't open its books to show what the current financial reality looks like post-Caitlin Clark. Without that information, nobody knows where all the new revenue is actually going or how profitable the league might actually be right now. The timing of this labor battle makes everything more complicated and more crucial. The league is riding an all-time high in popularity, thanks to the Caitlin Clark effect that brought unprecedented mainstream attention. 3 expansion teams are joining, with Portland and Toronto following Golden State's entry this season. But the entire offseason is frozen until a deal gets reached. The draft, free agency, and expansion draft can't happen without a new collective bargaining agreement in place. The 2026 season start date is officially in jeopardy, and Paige Bucker's highly anticipated rookie debut could be canceled before it even begins. This is simultaneously the worst possible time for a work stoppage and the best leverage players have ever possessed. Fans are more invested than they've been in decades. Corporate sponsors are watching closely to see if their investments are protected. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has offered to step in personally if needed to help broker a deal. Both sides have already extended the deadline twice, first from October to November and then from November to January 9th. History suggests that deals eventually get done in situations like this. But players are refusing to back down this time, and that changes everything. This fight isn't really about money at its core. It's about respect, partnership, and the fundamental question of whether WNBA players are charity cases who should be grateful for whatever they're given or business partners who deserve their fair share of the success they're creating. Players are exhausted from being treated like employees receiving handouts instead of athletes driving a billion-dollar enterprise. Breanna Stewart recently called a meeting between the two sides a wasted opportunity, saying they couldn't even get into a deeper dive on the real issues. Based on the league's most recent proposal, she added, they aren't able to get to a place where they're actually talking about the same thing. That's not the language of parties close to compromise. That's the language of fundamental disagreement. The league believes that massive salary increases represent a transformational deal. Players believe that only a true revenue-sharing model tied directly to business growth qualifies as transformational. One side has to blink before January 9th arrives, and right now, neither seems willing to budge. Those million-dollar headlines hid the real story completely, and players saw through the smoke and mirrors the moment the proposal hit the table. Refusing what looks like a generous offer sounds crazy to casual observers, until you understand the actual math and what's at stake long-term. Getting 30% of a rapidly growing pie beats accepting a fixed percentage of what you're told you deserve, especially when that percentage shrinks over time. The WNBA's explosive growth is happening whether players get fair compensation or not. And that's precisely why they have leverage right now. Players are watching Caitlin Clark make $12 million and Angel Reese pull in $9 million almost entirely from off-court deals, while the average player makes $102,000 playing professional basketball. That disconnect between star earnings and regular salaries is driving everything behind the scenes. January 9th will reveal whether the WNBA learned anything from decades of NBA labor wars or if ownership greed will kill the momentum that women's basketball finally achieved. Players already proved they're united and ready to strike. The only question left is whether the league is ready to truly share the success instead of just talking about it. The next few weeks will determine the WNBA's trajectory for the next decade, and everyone involved knows it.